Well, hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today for the second time. This is the second time I've tried to record this video. Hopefully it's working. If you're watching this, that means it worked, and yay. But anyway, I am here to expand on a conversation that was happening over on Twitter, which is something a little bit different right now. But basically, Rachel at Pace Amore Libre, I hope I pronounced that correctly. I'll link her tweet down below, did a post where she said, I feel like I haven't actually talked about books on here being Twitter, in ages. Here are 4 books I read in 2020 that I want more people to read. And she included the covers of 4 books. The ones she included are Daughter from the Dark by Marina and Sergei Dyachenko, Hysteria by Jessica Gross, Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Basterica, and Abigail by Magda Szabo. So I saw a bunch of people were sharing their own 4 titles that they had read in 2020 and wanted more people to discover and read. And I did my own, but I thought it would be fun to make a video about that and expand the list a little bit. So that's what I'm here to do. And hey, it's my channel, so I get to do what I want. That's the fun thing about having a channel. So let's dive right in. And the first book I wanted to shout out is Ask Again Yes by Mary Beth Keane. This is something that was published in 2019, but I read it over the summer. I want to say I finished it in July. I actually listened to the audiobook, but I have the physical copy of it. And I really enjoyed it. A couple of people commented at the time they didn't enjoy it as much as I did, but I'm really hoping that more people will discover this. And it can kind of, because I feel like this really flew under the radar and not very many people spoke about it. And I enjoyed it. And hopefully if I enjoyed it, more people out there would fall under its charms. So basically, this is the story of 2 families who are neighbors in a town. And both of the fathers are police officers. And the daughter of one family and the son from one family are interested in each other. And the mother of the boy in this picture is mentally ill, and the situation spins out of control, and there is, I don't want to give away exactly what happens, but there is a violent situation that happens as a result of arguing over the children potentially dating. And then the novel really moves forward in time. And it's not really a spoiler since it happens early on in the book, but the daughter and the son ultimately decide that they do want to pursue their relationship. And the book follows the complications and long-lasting impact of this over time. And it follows the estrangement of the son from his family. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about this book is that in pursuing their relationship, they assume that love is really the only thing that matters. And Mary Beth Keane is really interested in showing that, yes, that matters, but it's not the only thing that matters, and it's kind of foolish to assume that nothing else matters. So they assume that the past doesn't matter. Well, the past matters. And it has long-lasting implications that they try to keep moving past, or saying, well, those things don't matter, but they do matter. And the fact that they keep trying to brush past them ends up causing more problems. And they assume like family doesn't matter, like the son and his mentally ill mother, but it's something that keeps coming back to sort of haunt them in the end. And that was really resonant for me. And I love books about complicated families, and this is definitely one of those. And I feel like it's one that is done very well and very measured, and deals with a lot of complex issues, including mental illness and a little bit about immigration as well. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it came together really well in the end, and I think it is a little bit long. There is a little bit too much going on. Maybe it loses focus a little bit in the middle, and I think that's probably why some people didn't respond to it. But I think it came together in a really heartfelt way, and I enjoyed it a great deal. So I'm putting it out there and saying that this is a book that I hope more people will discover. It will be on my best books of 2020 list, but I wanted to give it a particular shout out here. And I'm not going to say where it will end up on my list. That will be for you to find out when I get to that. And for now, I'm just going to say that, again, this is something that I really hope more people will discover and enjoy. Next is a book that I do not have a physical copy of. I listened to it on audio back in June. It's All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. I listened to this on audio in June because in June, I like to focus on LGBTQ authors and stories. And my mission statement for this past June, with Black Lives Matter and everything that was going on in the world at the time, was to focus on Black queer stories and authors. So this was part of that, and I'm really glad that I did it. Ostensibly, this is a young adult book, but if that is something that is kind of like a trigger for you, or like makes you nervous about the book, please don't be scared off, because I think this is a book that is relevant for any age, because George M. Johnson really portrays the topic with honesty and a sense of candidness. And I think he approaches the topic like, hey, nobody was willing to talk to me about these things when I was a kid, so I'm going to talk to you about it, and I'm going to give you the real, basically. And I really appreciate that. It feels very refreshing to have somebody talk about these things. And one of the things I really like about the book is that there was nobody who would have those conversations when I was a teenager. And I was in a bit of a different situation than most people, because I have a gay father, so I could kind of find out about things even if I wasn't being told them directly. But there are still a lot of ways where a lot of topics were taboo. Certainly in school, it wasn't talked about, and I had no resources. The internet was a brand new thing at the time. So there is a lot more access, but it's difficult even today, it's difficult for you to figure out what all of that information means for yourself. So having somebody distill it and say, okay, here's the way it works, is nice. So it's interesting, because a lot of the story deals with like race, and the spectrum of sexuality and the spectrum of gender. And there are aspects of that certainly don't apply to me. I mean, obviously race is one. I have also been, I guess, lucky enough to be secure in my own gender my whole life. And so that isn't something I've had to deal with or struggle to define in my life. And yet so much of this book resonated with me. And even the conversations that don't apply to me, like gender and race, are things that I wish had been in the mainstream and people had been talking about when I was a teenager. And it's really nice to see them being talked about now. And I feel like I learned a lot. And he is very open and honest about his life and his experience as a Black queer man growing up in the United States, and what that was like, and particularly at a time when people didn't understand him. Because of course, it's easy to focus on coming out stories where things are easy nowadays, but there are a lot of people who don't have it easy right now. So I really enjoyed this story. This is a nonfiction, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope that it is. I don't see a lot of people talking about it in my corner of BookTube. That doesn't mean it's not out there in other corners, but I feel like because it's not here, not something I see a lot in this corner, I wanted to kind of bring it here and bring it up one more time. It will also be on my best of 2020. I won't say where. I don't think I've even figured out where, so I should stop teasing. But yeah, it's definitely something that I hope more people will discover. And George M. Johnson reads the audiobooks. I would definitely recommend doing the audiobook for that, because I feel like hearing him read his own words makes it even more resonant and meaningful. The next book I want to talk about is one that will be familiar to people who have followed along. It's The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deesha Philyaw. I just finished this book last week, last week or the week before, I can't remember. And I know a lot of people commented and said that they are seeking this book out and are going to give it a try, and that is great. But I'm going to keep preaching the gospel of The Secret Lives of Church Ladies and hope that more people discover it. This is a book from a small publisher. It is a debut author, and I really hope Deesha Philyaw kind of blows up and takes over the world. I actually have been talking about this book since it made the long list for the National Book Award, because it immediately jumped to me off of that list as something that I wanted to read, and I'm glad I got around to it. And it has this adorable tiny little trim size that just kind of makes me happy. I don't know why. And so if you're unfamiliar, if you haven't heard me talking about it, this is a collection of stories all centered around the experience of Black women in this country, and particularly dealing with religion, but also just with society at large, and how frequently their desires and the things that they want contradict what is expected of them, either by religion or by society, and the conflict that creates in their own lives. I think it's beautiful. I think it's really well done. I love that it has a very unapologetic sexuality to it. My recommendations for this are, if you're someone who has loved The Women of Brewster Place, or Luster by Raven Lalani, or Transcendent Kingdom by Yagasi, I would recommend checking this out. And if you haven't read those books but have been interested in reading any of those, I would say definitely pick this one up and give it a try, because I think it's it's another one that's going to be on my best of 2020 list. But just by virtue of the fact that I haven't seen a whole lot of people talk about it, hopefully the people who picked it up after I finished it and reviewed it will be spreading the word and it will get out there more. But I'm hoping that this is going to hit a tipping point and become a big thing, because I really enjoyed it a lot. Obviously, or else I wouldn't be talking about it here. Next is another one I've been talking a lot about recently. I just finished it last week. It's Overground Railroad by Candacy Taylor. And this, actually, I finished it. It's going to be, I'm going to have a full review of it in my upcoming Friday Reads video, but I've talked about it in the previous two, and I've really enjoyed it. So if you're not familiar with Overground Railroad, it deals with the history of the Green Book. But by talking about the Green Book, it really talks about Black travel in America. And by talking about the ability of Black people to travel in this country, it really talks about segregation, Jim Crow, and the difficulty of being a Black person in a country that is supposed to be equal. And so if you're unfamiliar with the Green Book, or if you've seen the movie and were confused because the movie doesn't really deal with what the Green Book is, I'll explain. The Green Book was a sort of travel guide for Black people that was started in 1936 and was published almost annually into the 1960s. And it missed a couple of years in the 40s because of World War II, where there were severe travel restrictions because of gas shortages, or gas rationing at least. And it goes year by year in the publication, and by doing that, it's actually a very smart structure. It allows it to talk about a lot of these frequently really quick changes that happened in society that impacted the Green Book. So the Green Book was a guide because in this period before air travel really took off, cars were the only way to really get around and travel, and there were people who had leisure time and wanted to see the country. So they would hop in their cars and go around. And for Black people, that was a terrifying experience because, especially in segregated areas, there was no guarantee that you were going to be able to find lodging or a restaurant that would serve you or a gas station that would allow you to fill up your car. So the Green Book would tell you, if you're, say, going to Houston, here are the gas stations, barber shops, hotels, restaurants, nightclubs that will welcome you and serve you and be safe for you. And what's really smart is that Candacy Taylor doesn't just talk about this as something that's in the past or something we've moved on from. She talks about it as something that still is part of our urgent present and ties it to the current Black Lives Matter movement. And she talks about Ferguson in particular because Ferguson was a sundown town, and how she talks about how the implications of that have continued and obviously intensified in a lot of ways and may have led to the current problems. So it feels really urgent and relevant and just really insightful. I got a lot out of reading it, so I hope more people will read it. This was something I had not heard of at all until the New York Times Book Review did its 100 Notable Books of 2020, and this was on the list. That is the only reason I found it, and I'm just very lucky that it was available as an audiobook on Scribd. I am going to be seeking out the physical book because it looks, from the photos I've seen, it looks really beautiful and like it has great photos and things like that. So I want a physical copy at some point, but the audio is a great way to go if you want to go that route. It is, like I said, it is available on Scribd. Next, I'm going to talk about a book that is actually fairly well known, but I feel like more people could discover because they sort of see it as a genre book in maybe a bad way. And that's actually how I discovered it. It's True Grit by Charles Portis. I listened to an audio version of this back in January. It was one of the first books that I read in 2020. And I did it as part of my Read Outside Your Comfort Zone challenge. One aspect of that challenge was that I wanted to read genres that I don't traditionally engage with, and one of those was a Western. So True Grit was the first Western that I read in 2020. There were at least two others. And I really loved it. I actually kind of discovered it because I settled on True Grit because as part of my project, I was looking at favorite Westerns, and I found True Grit popped up in a couple of places, but then I found out that Donna Tartt, the author of The Goldfinch, which by the way, I DNF'd and did not like, she loves the book so much that she narrated the audiobook, and that was really interesting to me. And I listened to it, and she actually does a really good job with the narration. And I had seen both film adaptations, the John Wayne one, meh, and the Jeff Bridges one, which I actually liked. And that kind of piqued my interest. So I listened to it and I really liked it. And I think what I like about it so much is that it is this wonderful character study of Maddie Ross, who is the protagonist. She is a young, I would think, 12 or 13-year-old girl who is incredibly stubborn and willful and smart. And basically, she wants to avenge her father, so she hires Rooster Cogburn, who is a man that she has heard has true grit, and insists that she needs to go with him on the adventure. Even taking all of the other elements of the book out, just her as a character, it's just a really delightful. And I know a lot of people had mentioned that they hadn't read it when at the time when I was talking about it, because I read it in January. So I feel like this is something that is worth maybe discovering or rediscovering if you have heard of it but have kind of brushed it off. Definitely don't sleep on it. It's a great book. And I would actually recommend checking out the audio, because I feel like hearing it performed as well. And like I said, Donna Tartt actually does a great job really getting the voice of Maddie. I definitely enjoyed it that way. The final book I would hope that more people would discover, there have been a couple of people who have talked about this, but I feel like some people are a little bit leery of it because of the genre or format that it is. It's My Brother's Husband, which is in 2 volumes. It's by Gengoroh Tagame, volume 1 and volume 2. And this is something I read as part of the Read Outside Your Comfort Zone challenge, because I wanted to read manga and I sought one out that would kind of fit my own personal interests. And I just really loved this story. So basically, this guy right here is Canadian, and he shows up at the doorstep of this guy who's Japanese and is divorced and lives with his daughter. And basically, he is his brother's husband. He had been estranged. I'm forgetting the character names. It's been a while, but he had been estranged from his brother. His brother is now dead, and he's been kind of quietly struggling with that. And now his brother's husband, or widower, shows up at his house, and that kind of forces him to confront his feelings about his brother and the estrangement that they went through, and the closest that they had as children, and his own latent homophobia and the homophobia of society, especially it's being set in Japan, where obviously things are very different than they are in the United States. And I just loved that story. It's about connection, it's about family, it's about grief, it's about, like I said, homophobia, and I really enjoyed it. I'm not going to flip through, but the illustrations are really good. I'm not going to flip through because there is nudity, so trigger warning for that. I did not know this when I read it, and someone commented, Gengoroh Tagame is actually, he's kind of like the Japanese Tom of Finland. So go ahead and Google that if you would like, but he certainly is. But it's just a really cute story. Of course, the child is like adorable and cutesy in the way children are in a lot of comics, cartoons, movies, and everything, but in a really sweet way. And I really enjoyed this story about connection and family and found family as well. And I kind of hope that Gengoroh Tagame does another volume or 2 of this story, because they are characters that I would really like to reconnect with, even though I've clearly forgotten their names. So if, like me, you have traditionally had an aversion to manga, these are delightful volumes. And I did not realize, I thought I had purchased volume 1 thinking I would give it a try. Well, I didn't realize they're sold separately. There is a volume where you can get them together. But they are very much one story. So if you're going to do this, make sure you either order both or get the version that has them both together. Because, yeah, you need both volumes to get the whole story. And it reads very quickly. They look very thick, but it reads... I read both of them in a single afternoon. Well, I read this one in a single afternoon, and then I read this one in a single afternoon because I didn't have them at the same time. So there you go. Those are... not a long list of books. I kind of limited it to things that I really enjoyed myself and feel like more people should discover. So that's what I'm classifying for this video about things in 2020 reads that I hope more people discover. I would love to hear what you have read in 2020 that you would want more people to discover. I would love the comment section to be like a resource for people to try to broaden their horizons or find books that kind of got by them. So if you have other recommendations for things that you think more people should find, please put them in the comment section down below. Like I said, I kind of want that to be a resource. So type away. As always, and if you have opinions about these books, I would love to hear those as well. And as always, I really appreciate your time. If you follow along, I really appreciate that as well. And I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.